General Hospital spoilers teased that Michael Corinthos had long felt a gnawing unease in the pit of his stomach whenever he was around Willow Corinthos these days, but the moment the truth hit him, it landed with the force of a blow he could not recover from. The 4th of July had been meant to be a celebration, a day filled with light and fireworks, but instead it had become a turning point. The realization that Willow had orchestrated the abduction of Daisy Corinthos Gilmore lodged in his chest like a shard of ice. It wasn't a wild hunch, nor the whisperings of idle rumor anymore, it was a possibility that had taken root in his mind and was now sprouting bitter vines. He could not ignore the strange cadence of her moods since Sasha Gilmore Corbin had left Port Charles, nor could he dismiss the rumors that swirled in her absence, each one carrying a sharper edge than the last. Her once tender patience had given way to flashes of unpredictable anger, her calm replaced by jittery defensiveness. Michael could not pinpoint when it began, but he could trace its path right back to the day Sasha fled and Daisy vanished. Even now, Michael could see her standing on the porch of the Courtemain mansion, framed by the soft evening light, her voice shaking as she begged for just a moment with Wiley and Amelia. Her plea might have struck him once as heartfelt, but tonight it rang hollow, stripped of innocence by the shadows now hovering over her name. There was no proof, nothing tangible that would satisfy a courtroom, but Michael had more than enough to confront her. The absence of hard evidence was the only shield she had, and he wondered how long it would protect her. He could hold on to what he knew, bide his time, and let her unravel on her own. Or he could act now, tear the veil from her face, and let the world see the truth for what it was. Willow's world was already slipping through her fingers. The custody battle for Wiley and Amelia loomed like a storm cloud, and each passing day brought her closer to losing the fight entirely. She told herself that Michael was her last hope, that if she could just convince him, the rest would follow. But her desperation betrayed her in ways she did not see. Every too loud plea, every too long stare, every trembling pause in her sentences deepened Michael's conviction. The 4th of July had been her breaking point. Drew Courtemain had failed to deliver on his promises, his influence falling short of shielding her from the law's slow, grinding process. And in that moment of despair, Willow had acted. She had told herself it was a way to protect what was hers, to lash out at those who had taken too much already. But the truth was more dangerous. It was an act born from pure desperation, and desperation rarely left clean footprints. Michael had replayed the events in his mind countless times. He thought about the flicker of security footage from a nearby store, the indistinct shadow in the background. It could have been anyone, but his gut told him otherwise. He thought about the odd gap in Willow's story that day, the phone call she claimed to have taken, the errand she never explained. Each thread was thin, but woven together they formed a tapestry too distinct to ignore. He found himself sitting alone at the Courtemain study desk, his eyes fixed on the muted replay of a baby monitor's footage. No clear image, but a sound, a faint shift of fabric, a hesitant breath pulled him deeper into the web. He wondered if she had thought about what it would mean if she were caught, if she had considered that every moment she spent with the children would be weighed against the risk of losing them forever. Elizabeth Baldwin's advice had been simple: take a breath, think before acting. She had seen too many people destroy themselves by acting in anger. But Michael's anger wasn't wild, it was cold, calculated, a slow burn that made him feel more in control than he actually was. He could confront Willow now, demand the truth, and watch her crumble. Or he could keep the knowledge locked away, using it when the moment was most opportune. That choice haunted him because it meant holding his children's safety in his hands while letting the woman who endangered them walk free. Willow, for her part, did not see the full weight of Michael's suspicion. She saw only the closed door to her children's rooms, the carefully measured words he spoke to her, the way his eyes lingered on her just a fraction too long. She thought if she could just break through the wall between them, he might listen. She clung to the image of Wiley's bright smile, Amelia's small hands reaching for her. She told herself she was fighting for them, that she would weather any humiliation if it meant having them back. But deep down, she knew that her lie, the lie of that summer night, was the one brick in the wall that would never come down. Her visit to the Courtemain mansion had been a calculated risk. She told herself that showing up in person would demonstrate sincerity, that her desperation might stir some sympathy. But when Michael opened the door and let her inside, the weight of the air between them was heavy enough to crush any hope she had brought. She pleaded, she reasoned, she even let the edge of her voice crack with the sorrow she felt. Michael listened, silent, his eyes unreadable. The children were upstairs, unaware of the storm raging below. When she asked to see them, his refusal was soft but firm, and something in her snapped. The tremor in her hands became visible, the sharpness in her tone undeniable. She tried to rein it back, to cover her anger with another plea, but the damage was done. Michael had hated that moment, hated the look in her eyes when she realized she would leave without seeing them. But he hated more the knowledge that her rage was not just the frustration of a mother, there was something darker behind it. He thought about Daisy, about Sasha's departure, about the way one choice had set off a chain of events they might never recover from. He knew what he had to do, but the weight of it made every step forward feel like betrayal. And yet, there was no path that didn't feel like betrayal. If he stayed silent, he betrayed the trust of the children who depended on him. If he spoke, he betrayed the years he had spent loving and believing in Willow. He had been taught all his life that family came first, but what happened when family became the threat? The question gnawed at him as he watched Willow walk away from the mansion, her shoulders stiff, her steps quick and uneven. He knew she would be back. He knew this wasn't the end. And he suspected that the next time they faced each other, the masks they both wore would shatter completely. This was not just a custody battle anymore. It was a collision course between truth and survival, and somewhere in the middle stood two children whose futures depended on which way the scales tipped. Willow's desperation was a living thing now, pulsing in every glance, every word. Michael's suspicion was the steel that kept it at bay. And the day was coming when one would overpower the other. Michael could not shake the image of Willow's face that night, the strain etched into her features and the flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. It was more than fear, more than sadness, it was a silent calculation, as though she was already planning her next move. He had seen enough to know that she would not let go easily. Her fight for Wiley and Amelia was not simply about love, it had become a battle for survival, and survival often drove people to places they never thought they would go. The question was how far she would be willing to push before she broke herself completely. In the quiet days that followed, Michael kept a deliberate distance. He moved through the Quartermain mansion like a man carrying an invisible weight, answering questions with the smallest possible number of words, avoiding unnecessary contact with Willow. Yet in the privacy of his study, he began to gather every small piece of information he could find: phone records, inconsistencies in her alibis, even notes from conversations she thought he had forgotten. He told himself it was about protecting the children, but part of him knew it was also about confirming the truth for himself beyond doubt. Living in suspicion was corrosive, and Michael was tired of the acid eating away at him. Willow, meanwhile, felt the wall between them harden. Every polite exchange carried an undercurrent of mistrust, and each time she requested to see Wiley and Amelia, the pause before Michael's answer grew longer. She began to sense the presence of something else, a quiet watchfulness that followed her even when they were not in the same room. It was as if Michael's silence had become a net, slowly tightening around her. But instead of retreating, she convinced herself that the only way forward was to push harder, to make him feel the weight of her absence in the children's lives. When she appeared again at the mansion, she brought a small gift for each child, something chosen with careful thought, meant to remind them of her warmth and presence. Michael accepted the gifts but placed them on the mantel rather than handing them over immediately. It was a subtle gesture, but it told Willow everything she needed to know: he was not ready to let her back in. The rejection stung more than she expected, and for a moment her mask slipped. Michael caught it, a flash of cold determination behind her disappointment, and it hardened his resolve. Whatever happened next, he could no longer pretend that this was simply a custody dispute. There was too much at stake, and too many unanswered questions. Elizabeth Baldwin remained a quiet but steady presence in the background, offering Michael the occasional reminder that acting in haste could backfire. She urged him to think about the bigger picture, to consider not just the legal outcome but the emotional toll on the children. Michael heard her, but her words did not soften the steel in his spine. The reality was simple: if Willow had truly taken Daisy, she was capable of actions that placed others in danger. No amount of careful pacing could change that. Rumors in Port Charles began to shift subtly. Sasha's absence was still discussed in hushed tones, but now there were whispers about Willow's increasingly erratic behavior. Each story was vague enough to avoid outright scandal, yet pointed enough to plant seeds of doubt in those who heard them. Willow noticed the sideways glances when she walked into Kelly's, the slightly lowered voices when she passed by in the park. She tried to tell herself that gossip was meaningless, but deep down she knew it was a symptom of something larger. Her control over the narrative was slipping. The custody hearing, delayed until October, loomed like a date carved in stone. Willow counted the weeks not in days, but in opportunities, each chance to prove herself, each visit that might shift the balance in her favor. Michael, in turn, viewed the time as a series of checkpoints, each one bringing him closer to deciding whether to reveal what he knew. It was a silent race between two opposing goals. One to reclaim, the other to protect. Neither spoke openly about it, but every interaction between them was weighted with the knowledge that the truth, whatever form it ultimately took, would decide everything. One evening, Michael found himself alone in the nursery, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. Wiley's toy truck lay tipped on its side, Amelia's blanket draped over the edge of her crib. He thought about what it meant to raise children in an environment where trust was fractured. He thought about the risks of waiting too long to act. And he thought about Willow, how she had once been a partner in this life, how easily they had once trusted each other with the most fragile parts of themselves. That trust was gone now, replaced by a quiet vigilance that made even simple conversations feel like battles. Willow sensed the change in him as clearly as if he had spoken it aloud. She adjusted her approach, tempering her words with carefully measured vulnerability, letting her voice soften when she spoke of the children. She played the part of the devoted mother on the outside, but inside she was already bracing herself for the confrontation she knew was coming. Michael's eyes gave too much away. They told her that he had not only suspected but had begun to piece together a version of events that could destroy her completely. And yet, part of her still believed she could turn it around. She imagined scenarios in which Michael, confronted with the depth of her love for Wiley and Amelia, would choose to shield her from the consequences. She imagined the possibility of rebuilding their fractured connection, of convincing him that whatever mistakes she had made were born of desperation, not malice. But even as she clung to those thoughts, she could feel the clock ticking down toward a moment when her future would no longer be hers to control. The air in Port Charles felt charged, as though the entire town could sense that a reckoning was approaching. Conversations about the custody battle carried an unspoken weight, and friends of both Michael and Willow found themselves quietly choosing sides. The children, blissfully unaware, played in the safety of their routines, but even their laughter seemed to echo with the tension that wrapped around the adults. Michael knew that whatever choice he made would ripple through all of their lives, shaping not only the outcome of the custody hearing but the very structure of their family. And Willow knew that when that choice came, it would either save her or end her. Michael's decision came slowly, as if each day carved away another layer of hesitation until only resolve remained. By the time the leaves in Port Charles began to turn, he no longer questioned whether he would confront Willow, only when and how. He understood that timing was everything. Too early, and she might find a way to twist the narrative, to pull sympathy from those still willing to see her as a victim. Too late, and the damage could spread beyond repair, putting Wiley, Amelia, and even Daisy at risk. The night he chose to act began quietly. The Quartermain mansion was settled in the kind of silence that came only after the children were asleep. Michael stood in the library, a small flash drive in his palm. It contained what he believed to be the missing piece, a set of images and timestamps from a private security feed near the park on the 4th of July. There was no single, undeniable frame of Willow taking Daisy, but there were enough fragments to build a picture, enough shadows and patterns to match her movements to the timeline. It was circumstantial, yes, but combined with her increasingly erratic behavior, it was a picture Michael could no longer ignore. Willow arrived unexpectedly, wearing the same tentative smile she had used so many times before. She asked to see the children, insisting she had something important to give them. Michael didn't answer right away, instead gesturing toward the couch. She sat, scanning his face for clues, but found only the kind of stillness that made her uneasy. He handed her a cup of tea, and for several moments they spoke about nothing, the weather, a charity event in town, the repairs to the garden fence. It was a strange civility, as if both knew the ground beneath them was fragile but neither wanted to make the first crack. Then Michael placed the flash drive on the coffee table. Willow's eyes lingered on it, then lifted to meet his. He explained, carefully but without softening the words, what he had found. He described the footage, the timeline, the inconsistencies in her alibis. He told her about the whispers in town, the way people had begun to notice the tension between them. Each sentence was like a stone dropped into a still pond, ripples spreading farther with every word. Willow's hands stayed folded in her lap, but her knuckles whitened. When he asked her directly if she had taken Daisy, the pause was telling. It was too long, too measured, as though she was building a response rather than giving the truth. She denied it, of course, firmly, almost convincingly, but Michael heard the difference between a denial rooted in truth and one built on necessity. He told her that his priority was the safety of the children, and that until he could be sure she posed no risk, her access to Wiley and Amelia would remain limited. The air between them felt heavy, each breath a reminder of the gap that could no longer be bridged. Willow left without another word, but in the days that followed, her actions spoke louder than any argument. She reached out to Elizabeth Baldwin, trying to use their mutual concern for the children as common ground. She made public gestures, volunteering at community events, visiting local schools, painting herself as a devoted mother figure in the eyes of the town. Michael recognized it for what it was, a campaign designed to shift public opinion ahead of the October hearing. It might even work if he couldn't find a way to solidify his case. As the hearing approached, the tension settled into every corner of their lives. Michael's family advised caution, some feared that pressing too hard without airtight proof could backfire. But Michael knew that waiting carried its own dangers. The children's well-being was not something he could gamble on. In private moments, he wrestled with the possibility that he might never have the kind of evidence that erased all doubt and what it would mean to act anyway. On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse steps were lined with reporters and onlookers. Willow arrived in a simple navy dress, her hair tied back, her expression composed but unreadable. Michael stood a few paces away, his jaw set, the flash drive in his pocket like a talisman. The courtroom was tense, each side presenting a version of the truth that was polished yet incomplete. Willow's lawyer spoke of her devotion, her stability, the deep bond she shared with the children. Michael's attorney countered with patterns of behavior, discrepancies in her accounts, and the implication, never outright stated, that she was capable of crossing lines most parents never would. Elizabeth watched from the gallery, her brow furrowed. She could see the cost this was taking on both of them, the way love for the children had been weaponized into something almost unrecognizable. Yet she also knew there was no easy resolution here, no way to untangle the truth without leaving scars. In the end, the judge postponed the final ruling, citing the need for further review of the evidence. It was not the decisive victory Michael had hoped for, nor the exoneration Willow had clung to. Instead, it left them suspended in a fragile truce, one that could break with the smallest shift in the wind. That night, Michael stood by the nursery door, watching Wiley and Amelia sleep. He thought about the road ahead, the months, perhaps years, of cautious co-parenting, of watching for signs that might confirm or disprove his deepest fears. Willow, somewhere across town, likely sat in her own silence, planning her next move, weighing whether to fight harder or to find another way back into their lives. The truth about Daisy's disappearance still hung between them, unspoken but ever present. Maybe one day it would come out in full light, or maybe it would remain a shadow in their shared history, shaping their choices without ever being named. Either way, Michael understood that the ending of this chapter was not a resolution, but a warning. Some secrets, once seeded, grow roots too deep to be pulled without breaking everything around them. And in Port Charles, those roots had only begun to spread.